Hello learners, I welcome you to the fourth lecture of week 2. Today we will talk about ecofeminism. When we use this term ecofeminism, the term clearly conveys that it must be some kind of combination between feminism and ecologism. Whenever we see environmental movement around us, we can observe one thing, that the rate of women's participation in these movements are very high in comparison to their participation in other social movements. So this high rate of participation speak of some kind of spatial bond between women and environmental issues. What is that bond? What are the various reasons for that bond? These are the issues of debate among the scholars. But ecofeminism, broadly speaking, can be called an ideology which tries to understand, examine, analyze these bonds, and most importantly, it wants to celebrate this bond between women and nature and sees a deep connection between women's liberation and liberation of nature. So today we are going to discuss various aspects of this eco-feminist ideology. In this lecture, we will cover these aspects: emergence and growth of ecofeminism, various perspectives on women-nature relation, materialist versus essentialist debate, various strands of ecofeminism and its critique. So, as I mentioned in the beginning only, that a quick look at the history of environmental movement informs that women have played very significant role in the fight for preserving trees, rivers, and the entire ecosystem. And this speaks of a deep, powerful, and connection with nature. So, ecofeminism is a branch of ecologism that examines, analyzes, and also celebrates this bond. It claims that feminism provides a completely new approach to the debate on nurturing the environment. Its primary claim is that the destruction of nature is an outcome of patriarchy. You see, it is very interesting. It says what? That when we talk about degradation of environment, we need to take into consideration the role of institution of patriarchy in this. So yesterday when we were talking about eco-socialism, so it tried to focus on role of capitalism in environmental degradation. Ecofeminism primarily focuses on role of patriarchy in environmental degradation. It argues what? That the damage which has been done to nature, we cannot say that it is due to mankind as a whole. Rather, it is due to the activities of men and their dominating social structure. So, ecofeminism believes that there is a close relationship between women's subordination and ecological degradation, and it is a result of patriarchal society and capitalism and also colonialism. So now we'll talk about emergence and growth of ecofeminism. So this branch of ecologism is quite new when we compare it to other branches. And when we see it in terms of feminism, so we can say that ecofeminism opened the doors to the third wave of feminism. The term ecofeminism was used by Francoise Dieubon, who was a French feminist for the first time, in her book Feminism or Death. She argued what? That there was a very close connection between marginalization of women and nature. And she regarded toxic masculinity as the driver of population increase, pollution, and such other damages to Mother Nature. After almost 1 decade of Dubon's writing, Karen J. Warren specified 4 core assumptions of ecofeminism. We'll try to understand what are these 4 assumptions. First, she says that there are important connection between operation of women and the operation of nature. They both are connected to each other. Second, understanding the nature of these connections is necessary to any adequate understanding of the operation of women and the operation of nature. What does it mean? That if we want to understand operation of women, or if we want to understand operation of nature, we firstly need to understand the relation or the connection between these operations. She further says that feminist theory and practice must include ecological perspective. So feminist theory, if it wants a kind of solution to women's subordination, so it should include ecological perspective. On the other hand, ecologism in its effort to protect environment must include a feminist perspective, because exploitation of environment and exploitation of women both are related to each other. These are not two separate questions, rather these are questions which are associated with each other. Now, since patriarchy is responsible for environmental degradation as well as women's subordination, so we need to understand that what is that patriarchal framework. And here Karen J. Warren talks on patriarchal conceptual framework, which is basically based on 3 aspects. First, it is based on value hierarchical thinking. What is this value hierarchical thinking? Which always ranks things as up, down, superior and inferior. Second, value dualism. Now, what is value dualism? Which often present things which are different from each other as opposites, as contrast, as exclusive and unequal in value, like mind, body, reason, emotion, male, female, culture, nature, and so on. And third, it is based on logic of domination that justifies power imbalances and subordination. So it tries to do what? That all the power imbalances which are there in the society, that are justified, that are natural, that has to be accepted. So this patriarchal thinking with its hierarchical, dualistic and oppressive perspective has negatively impacted both women and nature. Warren argues that this patriarchal framework does what? On the one hand, it naturalizes women when they are compared to animals. And in this case, what happens? It reduces them to a non-human status. On the other hand, it does what? It feminizes nature when it depicts nature as something to be dominated, controlled, or exploited by men. According to Caroline Merchant's ecofeminism perspective, there is a death of nature and gender operation is connected to it. She suggests that these oppressive hierarchies can only be altered by radical shift in gender relations. So what is she saying? That if we want to challenge this hierarchical relationship between man and woman, and at the same time between human society and nature, we need to begin with changing gender relations, because it is rooted there. Now we will talk about different feminist perspectives on relationship between women and nature. You see, within feminism there is a debate. How should we see this relationship between women and nature? And there are various perspectives. Here, broadly, we will try to focus on two perspectives. One group of scholars, when it comes to see women, their role in the society, they say all these roles are socially constructed. There is nothing natural about that. On the other hand, there are feminists who believe that these roles and what we say feminine principle that has a natural basis, what we call essentialist feminism. So here we will try to understand different perspectives on women and nature relationship within feminism from these two major perspectives. So there is one perspective which says that we need to uh, cut this women nature connection. Scholars like Simone de Beauvoir, they argue what? That the status of a woman is constructed historically by confining them to their biological roles, and that eventually limit their freedom and potential. So they say there is nothing natural about the role which has been assigned to women by the society. It is all a process of social construction. She clearly says one is not born but rather becomes a woman. She tries to explain it through the concepts of porsoy and ensoi. These two concepts are French concepts. It comes from existentialist philosophy. We'll firstly try to understand what is the meaning of porsoy, what is the meaning of ensoi, and what is Simone de Beauvoir's argument regarding it. Porsoy is basically, in English, it means being for itself. This represents a state of self awareness and the ability to shape one's future by embracing growth and change. On the other hand, ansoi, that is being in itself, it represents a fixed state of existence where there is no growth or change because of the absence of personal agency. So it is just similar to state of an object. Bua says what? That society perceives men as porsoi, who embodies freedom and change, while women are often seen as ensoi, who are tied to nature and their biological functions. They cannot go beyond that. So she suggests what? That women need to reject these limiting definitions which are created by patriarchal society if they really want to be free. They need to seek freedom beyond societal roles and biological constraints. So basically, the argument is that if we focus on or emphasize on natural connect between nature and women on the ground, that both have that nurturing properties, both have birth giving nature. So this group of scholars say it is going to confine women again to the same stereotypical roles which has been imposed on her by patriarchal society. And therefore, they say we need to cut down this relationship. However, this position has been critiqued by ecofeminists. One very important name is of Plumwood, who critiques Beauvoir's position on the ground that cutting women's connection to nature that may lead women to adopt the same exploitative attitude towards nature that men have historically held by transcending their biological roles and embrace a porsoi existence. So what Plumwood is saying is that if we are cutting down this relationship, so ultimately it will lead to a situation where women will also have the same kind of exploitative attitude towards nature as we can see in men. So therefore she rejects Beauvoir's position. Now moving further, there's another group which is ecofeminist perspective. They emphasizes the need of reaffirming the woman nature connection, and they give various arguments in their support. First, they say that the patriarchal narratives has to be challenged. How? By recognizing women's roles and experiences as important to foster a sustainable and life affirming society. Their argument is what? That if we really want to empower women, we need to dismantle patriarchal narratives. And if we really want to create sustainable and life affirming society, then women's role and their experiences needs to be recognized. A very important name among these scholars is of Mary Daly, who argues that the qualities and the traits like caring, nurturing, intuitiveness, they are not socially constructed. They are very much rooted in biological and psychological experiences. That means these are the traits which cannot be available to men because it comes from biological experiences. She contends that both women and nature have been undervalued and asserts that their inherent qualities are important to build a sustainable and a harmonious social relations. So basic argument is that if we are giving priority to masculine traits, that will result in a society based on hierarchy, based on exploitation, and therefore an alternative society can be created only with the initiative of women and by recognizing their spatial traits. This is the position taken by ecofeminist. Now we will talk about a very important debate on the relation between women and nature. This debate is essentialist and materialist debate. Now, one point before we start discussing this debate should be understood that there are large number of feminist scholars who have agreed that there is a deep connection between women and nature. But there is a difference of opinion that what is the basis of that connection. One group says that this relationship is innate relationship. Why? Because it is rooted in their biology. And other group says that there is nothing innate about that. It is only because of the socially constructed roles and responsibility. So this is the point which we will discuss in this essentialist versus materialist debate. Ecofeminists argue that there is an essentialist or natural connection between women and nature. So they are saying what this relationship between women and nature is what? Innate. And women have intrinsic understanding and knowledge of ecosystem. Like Vandana Shiva, she advocates this viewpoint. On the other hand, there are other feminists like Beena Agarwal who support that women share a distinct relationship with nature. But what is her argument? That this distinct relationship is not due to some kind of natural connect, but rather it is their material dependence on nature that helps women to gather practical knowledge of nature. What is her argument? In the division of labor, the kind of responsibility which has been assigned to women, like fetching water, making arrangement for fuels, this kind of duties which are assigned to women, it make them more dependent on environment. And whatever experience they have about environment, that comes from this kind of activity. There's nothing natural about that. Agarwal critiques ecofeminism for its neglect of differentiation among women's groups and overlooking the role of class, race, and ethnicity. She says what? That ecofeminism, on the basis of this innate connection between women and nature, fails to recognize that how women are going to be connected with nature, that will be shaped by their class, their race, their ethnicity. These are important aspects to take into consideration. And ecofeminism presents the oversimplified picture that all women are by birth connected to environment. So Bina Agarwal advocates the idea of feminist environmentalism as an alternative to ecofeminism. And this feminist environmentalism does what? It emphasizes the material basis for the link between nature and women. It recognizes that there is a deep link between nature and women, but the thing is that this link is due to certain material basis, and that is the social division of labor that has made women responsible for household duties, which make women more dependent on the common property resources. And therefore, they take special interest in protecting common property resources. So, these are the two positions with regard to uh, women and nature relation. Here, what we have seen that both accept that this relation is very special, but they say there are different reasons for this special bond or relation. Now we will talk about various strands of ecofeminism. Uh, the first branch is radical ecofeminism. It makes it very clear that patriarchy is the prime cause of operation of both women and nature. And therefore, what is the solution? Dismantling patriarchy. Only that can lead to liberation for both women and nature. Second is cultural ecofeminist. They emphasize on intrinsic connection between nature and women. Due to what? Due to biological and spiritual ties, which is rooted in shared sense of nurturance. They believe this bond gives women a heightened sensitivity to environmental harm and destruction. This is very important. It is because of that shared nurturance, women are more sensitive to environment. And that is what? That is basically associated with their biology. Third position is taken by socialist ecofeminism. It links environmental degradation with the twin impact of capitalism and patriarchy. So it says that when it comes to environmental degradation, it results from two exploitative institutions, capitalism and patriarchy, and they create a kind of nexus that leads to exploitation of women as well as exploitation of nature for material gain. So it presents a critique of both capitalism and patriarchy and also tries to understand how these two support each other. Now, next is spiritual ecofeminism. It emphasizes basically spiritual and religious connection between women and nature and advocates for spiritual reconnect. So it does what? It criticizes patriarchal religions and somewhere encourages women to connect with ancient goddess worship and nature oriented rituals. So its tone is more spiritual and religious. Then comes liberal ecofeminism. Since it derives from liberal feminism, obviously it believes in the policy of incremental change, piecemeal change, by integrating gender and ecological concerns into existing policies. So it says that firstly, what we need to do, we need to integrate this concern of ecology, the concern of gender into policies and bring policy changes. It advocates for legal reform for both liberation of women as well as liberation of nature. It talks about corporate responsibility and also equal representation in environmental decision making. So you see, these are the various branches of ecofeminism. Through that only we can have an understanding that how vast is this ideology, and it consists of various ideological positions with regard to women nature relation. Now we'll talk about major critiques of ecofeminism. One very important critique is done by Janet Behl. who critiques ecofeminism for somewhere biologically defining women as inherently nurturing, caring, uniquely connected to nature. And in this case, she argues that it limits women's potential for liberation and does what? Again, reinforces the traditional gender stereotypes. So she argues what? That ecofeminism, though, talks about that it is interested in liberation of women and liberation of nature. Behel says that it appears to be regressive rather than liberating for women because again it will reinforce that gender stereotypes, and that is the limitation of ecofeminism according to Jen Behel. Now, Cicely Jackson and Bina Agarwal, their critique of ecofeminism is uh, based on ecofeminism and its position that women are connected to nature by birth or this connection is innate. So Jackson says what? That ecofeminism fails to take into account the differences that exist to, due to class and ethnicity. She says that it's true that women are deeply connected with nature, but the thing is that this connection cannot be understood without referring to the class and ethnic position of women. And this point is further continued by Bina Agarwal, who says what? She says that ecofeminist views women as homogeneous group, and it does what? It overlook differences in class, race and ethnicity. And why Bina Agarwal finds this position very, very problematic? She argues that when you see women as a homogenized group or as a monolithic group and there is a uniform relation with nature, what happens? You somehow overlook the spatial struggles, spatial experiences of women related to environmental degradation, especially those women who are situated in the third world or what we say global south. She says that the experiences of women in the third world, especially regarding environmental degradation, they feel a different kind of connect because of not only their uh, woman body, but because of their uh, ethnic position, because of their class position, and that needs to be taken into consideration. So Bina Agarwal says what? That this perspective neglects the unique struggles of third world women facing environmental degradation. Critics also argue that spiritual ecofeminists focus too much on rituals and spirituality. And somewhere they do what? They do not talk about political activism, which can bring actual change. They are more concerned with spiritual and ritual aspect. So these are the major critique of ecofeminism. Now, these are some of the references that I have used in my lecture, and you can use these references as your suggested reading. Coming to the activity question. The first question is discuss the various perspectives on women nature relationship. Second, what are the key arguments of feminist environmentalism against ecofeminism? And third is aimed at making you think critically. You have to think over this situation. How women's relation with nature is shaped by their race, class, caste, and dwelling places. You have to think, is the bond which a rural woman, especially a woman coming from agricultural community, the bond which she feels with environment or nature, can it be felt similarly by urban women? Similarly, a woman living in the hilly areas, the kind of bond they have with nature, is it available to other women also? Similarly, women living near the nuclear testing site, how their experience shapes their relation with nature. So these are the various dimensions on which you need to think. So thank you, learners. We in this lecture try to understand ecofeminism. We try to understand the various branches of ecofeminism. We also try to understand the materialist and essentialist debate within ecofeminism, and we also discussed its critique. I hope this lecture would help you to understand various eco-feminist position, and please go through the lecture, and if you find any doubt, any query, feel free to post your queries in discussion forum. We'll try our level best to respond to your queries. Thank you very much.